So first off, Richard, straight off the bat, how does it feel to be back, sort of performing live in front of crowds after a bit of a break for the band?
It was amazing, actually. I didn't quite know what to expect, but we did a show last year in London that at the Forum in London that sold out in like 10 minutes. We didn't even know if anyone would turn up. It was literally like, let's just almost just see what happens, toss a coin and see what happens in it. And it was great, and the vibe was great. It was great being back in a room rehearsing with the band again, and it was just great then going out, playing the songs in front of people and seeing the reaction. And it was kind of uplifting. I mean, it sounds a little bit over the top, but it was quite, after the sort of few years we've had, it was a real kind of, it was a moment. It was great.
Mm. And you mentioned that break there. Why do you think your music still remained so popular in that time? And, now you've sort of instantly come back and been a smash hit. What is it about your music, do you think, that gave it such sort of staying power?
Well, I mean, funnily enough, the things that we were talking about in 2005, on Stars of CCTV in particular, I mean, nothing's changed. If anything, it's got worse, So a lot of the thematically, a lot of the things still seem current, but essentially, we were just kind of celebrating the lives we led, and whether they were, not always the one you might have chosen in your dreams, but they were what we were dealt, and we were just kind of going, this is where we're at, and we're going to try and enjoy what we do, and we're going to look around and talk about what we see around us, and we're not afraid to be who we are. And I think people kind of just got that, they were like, I can somehow relate to these guys, and and it just sort of felt, and it's still, a lot of people hadn't. It was quite weird, actually, because the crowd at that, for instance, at that London show, was that there was obviously some people there who had been to see us 15 years ago or whatever it was, from and then there was also some younger people there, and who had like either maybe they were the kids of these people or had discovered us since or whatever. But it was kind of like it was 2005 all over again. People just went for it. I mean, grown men who probably should have known better had far too much to drink, and ladies, to be fair, but they obviously always generally conduct themselves with a bit more decorum. And it was just brilliant. The whole room was singing all the songs. It was just a really good feeling.
And yeah, when you were sort of on that break, do you ever imagine that you'd be able to, you and the band would be sort of performing in front of sort of crowds like that, adoring crowds?
I mean, it's hard to imagine, especially, in lockdown. I've always had this weird thing that I've kind of like, I'm stupidly optimistic, and against all odds type optimistic. I always think, oh yeah, I sort of think, I at the back of my mind, I've always been rubbish at football. Okay, I like football, I like watching it, but I've never been any good at playing it. But at the back of my mind, I believe that if I gave it enough time, I could probably break into some kind of squad. That's just a sort of like what stupid way my brain's wired. So I kind of think, well, who knows? Anything's possible, just sort of, so I've always thought, maybe we could get back out there, and, and look around, and there are a lot of other acts from the same time as us and before playing. And I think that, perhaps a lot of the ageism, unless you're an out and out pop star, isn't there anymore. People just want to hear music, and long may that continue, because it's just good fun for everyone.
Mm-hmm. And you mentioned just before the sort of themes in your music, and a lot of people sort of relate to them. A lot of stuff for working class life. Do you feel like in recent years we've seen sort of resurgence in that sort of music, or do you think we're still sort of lacking a lot of stuff like that?
I think there's obviously there's moments of it. I mean, there's it feels like recently there's been a lot more. The stuff that has been there has been very angry, and understandably. If you think about Sleaford Mods and stuff like that, they have got they have an opinion, and they present it very forcefully. It's a tricky one though, isn't it? Because sometimes when things are, You know, what do you want to? This is something that we've been thinking about because we also, you know, we want to make new music. We want to write new music. That's always what we've been, you know, I've been doing that ever since anyway. And there's always that question, you know, do people, you know, do sometimes people just want to forget about what's going on outside? They want to come. It's like they go to the cinema. They almost want to forget about the outside world, and you know, like maybe they just want to come and see a show and you know and sing out loud and jump around and have some fun. And you don't, do they want it forced down their throat? But on the other hand, you know, it's kind of like it feels like sometimes it feels if no one's talking about it, it's almost like, is it actually true? I mean, of course it is. No one can deny what's going on. So it's a bit of a tightrope, isn't it? You know, you sometimes want people to have a bit of escapism when they come to a gig, and not be reminded of all the crap that's going on in their day-to-day lives. But also you want to highlight these things because you feel like, well, if we don't, who will? And it's great that there are more and more you know, acts, not, you know, not just bands, but acts, you know, coming from that part, that sort of way, and sort of, because, you know, the music industry has got very, you know, it's very hard to you know, get yourself to survive while you're trying to break, right? There's not as much money in it as there was before. So often you'll find that it's only the people who've got some kind of support from maybe rich parents or somewhere like that that can kind of stay the course, because otherwise you just, you know, you just can't make it work. So sort of less and less voices coming from that part of the world, but you know, hopefully there'll be a bit of a more of a resurgence.
And in your music, what are all the stuff you like to sort of highlight? What are all the stuff that you and the band get really angry about and want to sort of highlight and challenge?
I think, you know, when a lot of the stuff that we spoke about was just things that we saw in our day-to-day lives, and maybe it wasn't happening to us directly, but you'd sort of try and tell the story of what you saw. And it was just, it always felt to me that there was, you know, that whenever you looked in a, you know, then a magazine or whatever, there was, everyone was sort of like, you know, in awe of this world, this kind of like, you know, celebrity world or whatever that you just didn't recognize. It just wasn't what you were into. And we were just sort of sitting there trying to go, well, hang on a second, here we are. You know, we want to go out and we want to go out and have some fun, but also, you know what, you know, there's not enough months at the end of the money here. We haven't got the, you know, no one's earning enough money to be able to go out and do what you want to do. You know, it's that feeling of like being, you know, the sort of feeling of like you are a forgotten kind of crowd, if you like, you know, the sort of people who just do not get written about in the papers or talked about on the radio or, you know, whatever, and you're sitting there getting on with your life trying to make the best out of it you can, despite, you know, the struggles and the injustices. You know, and then, you know, and then looking at stuff like, you know, Felton was singing out was about a story I read about a kid who ended up in Feltham Young Offenders Institute, and unfortunately, and you know, they had, back then they had lots of issues there. He ended up committing suicide, and you're thinking, you know, what on earth must it be like in there to drive someone to do that? And because that was on our doorstep, it really resonated with me, and because the guy, you know, he was probably not far off age-wise, you know. So just things that kind of you see and think that, you know, that strikes a chord, or just sort of like you imagine, well, what if that had been me? What if I was in that person's shoes? So how would I feel? How would I react?
And is that sort of thing, is that what keeps you going with music? You want to sort of highlight those issues, or is it other things as well, like just general thrill of performing in front of the crowd, expressing yourself through your lyrics?
I think it's the you know, it's just, you know, making music's just really great for the sort of soul. You know, it's whether you're playing it in front of people or you're just sitting there with a guitar, you know, or a, you know, or a piano or whatever. You know, it's kind of my it's just the way I sort of seem to find ways of processing things. So I just really enjoy it sitting there. And sometimes you come up with something, sometimes you just sit playing chords, or sometimes you find an old piece of music and you figure it out. And it's just, I'll do it whatever happens, whether I was, you know, in front of a crowd or not. That's how I kind of, you know, find a nice place to be. And I think that's one of the, you know, looking at the, you know, cutting funding to arts in schools and this kind of stuff. You know, it's not all being, you know, learning music and being a musician isn't about trying to be a pop star and make it as a recording artist. It's about what the other things it gives you. You know, the the way you can analyze a piece, the way the way you can just sort of spend your time getting lost in a piece of music. It really brings other elements to what you. I mean, aside from that, if you did want to go and be some kind of successful recording artist, the things you have to learn. I mean, God, you need to be all over, basic accounting, legal stuff, the business side of stuff. You're mostly on that, the social media side of things. You've got to be on top of marketing, art, graphic design, all that kind of stuff. But just forget about that for a second, and just the joy you get of learning and playing a musical instrument. I think it just brings so much more, and it's just going to make you look at things a different way and be, if you're talking about issues of mental health, well, there's no better, learning a musical instrument is almost like meditation. They're sitting there practicing. It really gives you somewhere to go. So I think it's a real shame that people don't seem to value that as much, whether it's just kids in a brass band at school or something. It really enriches people's lives.
And sort of Liverpool, like a lot of other cities, has experienced a lot of cutbacks over the last decade or so. And do you feel like music and the arts has been one of the biggest casualties of that?
Well, it feels like that, particularly the government we have doesn't value it. They don't value, and I don't know why that is. I don't know whether they just think that they want, sort of automatrons to kind of go out and just sort of, fill the spaces of in the machine, so the machine keeps turning and they keep making money, or whether they feel that if you are because the arts and music and stuff like that, it teaches you to think creatively and to think critically, and obviously if you think that way, you might see through some of the kind of bullshit you get fed in the mainstream press some of the times, and that's something that people might not want to have. So I think there's probably a little bit of that, but it's probably just that those guys, they're all bankers, aren't they? And they just don't have it. They just all they value is money. They don't seem to have any kind of value of the other things in life that can enrich your life to make it much more worth living.
Yeah, and on to sort of your sort of memories of Liverpool then. Do you have any sort of fond memories of sort of being in the city sort of before with live gigs? Have you visited it often?
So we played several times. I mean, we played at the university really early days. I remember that being a really great gig, and then we came back with supporting the Kaiser Chiefs. When we were sort of, I mean, I always love the city. I always feel it's quite. I mean, probably it's easy for me to say, but people might not recognise it. But it feels quite romantic. It's a port city. It feels like there's stuff going on and people coming in, and you could get on a ship and go somewhere. And obviously, with its musical history, you just want to sort of go around and sort of hang out in places. But the one thing that always stuck with me actually was in Liverpool. We played Damon Albarn did his Africa Express thing, and it was 2008 at the Olympia, and we were asked to play, and we got on stage with Rashid Tahar. And while we were rehearsing, it was us, Rashid Tahar, and Mehdi Haddad, this young sort of Algerian French dude who played like an oud, which is like this kind of crazy folk instrument, but he put it through a Marshall stack. Super cool. And we did some stuff with them, and we were routine in the numbers backstage, and we were playing with, Mehdi and Rashid's band, and I'll never forget that moment because it was just hairs on the back of your neck. They were so good. And then Rashid turned up in this amazing suit. I mean, like fedora hat, wicked shoes, amazing suit. It was brilliant. But yeah, I think just in general, the city, I always have a sort of image of it, and I've watched too many Beatles films and biopics and stuff like that. So yeah, I can't wait to get back. Actually, it's gonna be brilliant.
Yeah, and do you feel like your sort of music, which is very honest, which is very political, do you feel like that sort of chimes well with Liverpool's city as well?
Yeah, well, I think the thing about that struck me about Liverpool is that it is honest, and they don't, it doesn't. The people don't take any bullshit. They say it as it is, and I think that's kind of it's refreshing. And as I wish more of the country could be like Liverpool, basically. and sort of stand up for themselves a bit more. Especially in this sort of like the kind of environment and climate, political climate we're in at the moment.
Yeah, that's great to hear. Yeah, and well, we've gone through a lot of what I want to speak about. Should we just go back to the sort of like when you sort of returned to music? I believe it was during lockdown, wasn't it, that you sort of did the sort of live performance and the sort of reaction from that. Was that the sort of real moment where you thought you've got like you and Hard Five, you thought we've got to go and do this, we've got to when everything opens up, we can, start gigging again, and it might be successful too.
Yeah, well, I did this. So what happened was it was sort of a slightly convoluted, was that so I've been working. Since with sort of Hard Five kind of gone on hiatus or whatever you want to call it. I'd been writing with other people, just like and producing other bands and stuff. And I'd come up with this little project with some friends of mine. It was a guy who produced the Hard Five records, the bass player who played with Amy Winehouse, Dale Davis, Smiley Bernard on drums. He's played with like Stroh Strummer to Robbie Williams, all sorts of stuff. And this amazing singer who sung on some of the Hard Five records called Kristen Cummins. And we come up with this sort of like band called Offworld, and we'd written some stuff and we'd recorded it, and we were putting some stuff out when lockdown happened. But so we were like just with that exploring live streaming, and we did something for the Albert Hall from here in this room actually, and this is quite cool. And then after Kristen went home, she was from the States, and I was thinking, I quite like that. It's quite nice. And everyone's sat at home, so I thought, well, I'll do a Hard Five one. I'll do the whole of Stars of CCTV. So I had to sit and remember how all the chords went and whatnot. And it was just the sort of doing it, and it was very weird because you're there on your own. You're there in your kitchen on your own. You've no idea what anyone thinks. But it was just a really nice reaction. People seemed genuinely, just like they loved hearing the songs. They were very gracious and generous, and I thought, well, if people are still up for it, and it felt really good to play the songs, maybe we should have a look. And the first thing I did was just spoke to my tour agent and said, look, as things started to open up again, what do you think? Do you think anyone still gives a shit? And he said, well, let's find out. And then that's what we did it, and it kind of it sort of all worked out in the end.
Yeah, and just finally, ahead of the sort of tour, what would you say is the one thing that you're most sort of looking forward to about it?
Do you know what I think? I want to make more of a conscious decision to sort of actually go out and get some shoe leather on the streets of the cities we're in and have a look round, because in the past, especially in the early days, when we were sort of like, we'd never done it before, we'd kind of sit tight, we'd get in the dressing room or wherever it was, and we'd sit there and we'd sort of like and I actually or stroke, get on it and get smashed and not really. So I thought, well, this time I'm going to spend a bit of time, get out and have a look round, and see. So, if there's anyone, if people have got recommendations of places to go, places to eat, places to see, things to do, love it. Let's have it. Love to have it. It's going to be like a travelogue. I'm going to be like a low rent Alan Wicker.
Well, Liverpool Echo is a great place for that. Before Eurovision, we did like a whole everyone in the office got together and gave their favorite place to drink and place to eat, which did really well. So yeah, plenty of stuff there if you're looking for something. Yeah. Have you got anywhere in mind in particular, or are you just sort of going in blind?
Yeah, I think I'll go in blind. I would have done the only one, and this is so niche, but so there was a sort of I'm a Brentford fan. Was a Brentford player. Still is a Brentford player called Sergi Canos.
Oh, yeah.
He came over here, and he originally came here and was signed to Liverpool.
Yeah,
and he was youth team, development team, and then he came to Brentford, and he sort of become this sort of cult hero. And I don't know if they've still got it, but his parents had a tapas bar in Liverpool.
Oh,
they stayed there. So I thought I could, man, if that's still going, I could make a pilgrimage to the Canos family restaurant. So that's one thing. That's kind of. I always have this thing I wanted to know. It depends, obviously, like the time wise, but I always like to try and get down. I'd like to get down to the waterfront as well, and and just sort of like soak a bit of that in somehow. So I always have these, I was just keep thinking of that scene. My favorite. I'm sorry to go on. Liverpool, Beatles, etc. It's kind of like, but there was that film from a few years ago called Backbeat. I love that film, and there's bits in there. It's like the Rolling Stones. I read somewhere that they used to go down to the river at Richmond and eat fish and chips. So I kind of love imagining how it was like then and going and just sort of hanging out where they would have hung out.
Yeah, like you said, yeah, it's just something very romantic about the sea, isn't it, and the port and that sort of quiet sort of place for reflection.
Definitely. So yeah, a bit of that. Just obviously it's October, so I suppose what's going to be going on with the weather? I imagine it's like a day like today, and it'll be gorgeous. But yeah, no, I'm going to think positive. I'm going to be positive. It's going to be great. Yeah. Or in some way, it's kind of like the rain is part of it, isn't it? It's part of the vibe. Just give myself a good coat. Stop complaining. I'll be all right.
Yeah, it's part of living in England, or England in particular. Yeah, is there anything else, Richard, you'd like to sort of talk about with the band, about the tour that we've not discussed so far?
I don't think so. I mean, I think just, please come along. It's going to be great fun. It'd be great to see everyone. And, we would like to, we're sort of seeing this really as, I think, that I may have forgotten because my memory's awful, but that show I mentioned in 2008 might have been the last time we played Liverpool. So, it's 15 years since we've been back. So, we'd like to make some more music. We'd like to come back and do some more shows. And I guess this tour is a bit of a, well, let's see what people think really. So we'll probably do one or two new ones, but we're gonna, we know what people want to hear. We're gonna play what they want to hear, and it'd be a good laugh. So come along and be a good night out.
Yeah, that's all good for me. Thanks, Richard, for your time. Been a pleasure. Been a pleasure speaking to you, and thanks for your very kind words about Liverpool. Really good to hear, and glad to hear the band's back after a bit of a break.
Thank you very much, and sorry for my 5 minutes late wiggling cables, just hoping for the best, but it seemed to work. So
yeah, it seemed to work. Yeah, it was good signal. So no problem there. Yeah, thanks very much for speaking to me, and best of luck for the tour, Richard.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Take care.
Thank you. Bye bye.